오늘은 조금 옛날 이야기를 해보려고 합니다. 한국군이 베트남에 파병됐을 시절의 이야기인데요. 구독자 442만 명의 미국 국적 초대형 역사 채널 심플 히스토리에서 베트남 전쟁 당시 한국군의 전투력이 얼마나 강했는지 다룬 영상이 있었기 때문입니다. 실제로 그 당시 베트남에서 싸운 한국군 장병들은 지금과 비교하면 훨씬 뒤떨어지는 장비로 싸웠을 텐데도 어마어마한 전투력을 발휘했던 것으로 평가받고 있습니다. 그들 대부분은 단지 가족을 먹여 살리기 위해 조금이나마 돈을 벌려고 나라의 부름에 응한 가장들이었는데요. 전장에서는 불과 15년 전에 6.25 전쟁을 겪어 산전수전을 다 겪은 최강의 베테랑들이기도 했습니다. 당시 베트남에선 미군을 포함해서도 그 정도의 경험을 갖춘 전력이 거의 없었고 그래서 한국군은 공포 그 자체의 존재였다고 전해집니다. 이러한 내용은 오늘 번역할 영상에도 담겨 있는데요. 그 내용을 함께 보시죠.
Why were Korean soldiers so feared in the Vietnam War? Under the cover of the Many Flags campaign, the United States war effort in Vietnam was supported by 5 allied countries. These were Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Thailand, and the Philippines. By far, the largest contingent was sent by the Republic of Korea. At one point, in the late stage of the war, there were more Koreans in Vietnam than Americans. During the 8 years of their deployment in Vietnam, Koreans fought bravely and left a remarkable impression, so remarkable that their enemies feared them and their allies awed them. Being one of the closest allies of the United States in Asia, South Korea was willing to repay the Americans for the help given to them during the Korean War. Already in 1954 and 1961, South Korea had offered to send its troops to Vietnam to help defeat the Communists. On both occasions, the Americans and South Vietnamese had refused the offer. 10 years later, however, amidst the need for growing foreign participation, the United States and its allies put the proposal on the table for Korea to enter the war. After a series of negotiations held between the United States and South Korean administrations, the agreement was made for South Korea to send its armed forces to South Vietnam under the following terms. The United States forces in Korea would remain in the same number to prevent a threat from North Korea. The United States would support the modernization of the South Korean Army, and the United States would finance all expenses of Korean troops in Vietnam, including transportation, equipment, and allowances. Apart from this, the U.S. government agreed to increase the amount of financial help to the rising Korean industry and economy. After the Korean National Assembly authorized the campaign on May 21, 1964, Korean units began to arrive in South Vietnam. The forerunner of the armed forces was the military assistance group that the Korean government deployed in late 1964. It consisted of a mobile army surgical hospital, a taekwondo team, and an engineer construction group. Focused primarily on reconstruction, medical aid, and counterinsurgency efforts, this group was popularly known as the Dove Unit. The first Korean combat unit to arrive in Vietnam was the Capital Division, better known as Mango, the Tiger Division. The Tiger Division was one of the most famous units in the entire South Korean Army. The division that came to Vietnam consisted of only 2 brigades, as 1 brigade remained in Korea for reasons of national security. The Tigers arrived in Vietnam in September 1965 and were deployed to the Quy Nhon region, replacing the American 1st Brigade of the 101st Airborne Division. Their task was to protect the vital routes 1 and 19. Better known to its allies as the Blue Dragons Division, the 2nd Marine Division arrived in Vietnam at the same time as the Tiger Division. They were initially deployed to Cam Ranh Bay, but subsequently moved to the Duy Hoa area, where they faced the 95th Regiment of the North Vietnamese Army. The largest Korean unit to arrive in South Vietnam was the 9th Infantry Division, the White Horse Division. The division arrived in September 1966 as part of the new agreement for sending additional Korean troops to South Vietnam. Consisting of an armored company, a reconnaissance company, an engineering battalion, 4 field artillery battalions, and 3 infantry regiments, the division counted 23,865 men. The unit was deployed in the Ninh Hoa district at the junction of Route 1 and Route 21, with the task of controlling the local population and defending the Ninh Hoa Air Base in Cam Ranh Bay. By the end of the war, South Korea deployed 2 more units, a Marine battalion that arrived in 1967 and a 12-man C-46 crew in 1969. In total, the Republic of Korea deployed 47,872 men to Vietnam between 1964 and 1969. All deployed units were under the command of Major General Chae Myung-shin. Once the 9th Infantry Division arrived in Vietnam, General Che gathered all his units under the command of the Corps headquarters in Nha Trang. The recruitment for the Vietnam tours was made strictly on a voluntary basis. The Capital Division was a reserve division, but was filled up by volunteers from the entire army. South Korean commanders were able to carefully pick candidates as the number of volunteers largely exceeded the volume of the division. This was the first international engagement of the South Korean Army, and everything had to be up to the highest standard. Only those of the best fitness, skills, and discipline were chosen. Once recruitment was over, the Tiger Division was filled with the best South Korea had. The command cadre was also the best the Army could offer. Hand-picked by senior commanders, the cream of the crop of the Korean Military Academy were chosen for the mission. They were put under the guidance of battle-hardened senior officers, veterans of the Korean War. American soldiers and officers had only words of praise for their Korean allies. The Korean Army had come a long way since the Korean War, when they were still learning from the American military. In Vietnam, Koreans were completely independent, showing great skill in all aspects of warfare from tactics to logistics. Back home, South Koreans were trained to defend their country from potential invasions from the north. The Americans believed that they would take the same stance in Vietnam as well, so it was a complete surprise when they showed a high level of aggressiveness in searching for and fighting the enemy. The South Korean soldiers were very thorough in their search and destroy missions. They would scan the designated area, leaving no rock unturned. Once the enemy was located, Korean soldiers would encircle them, slowly closing in and leaving very little space for the enemy to slip through. The success of the missions largely depended on discipline. After spending the day fighting against the enemy, Korean soldiers would stand waist-deep in the water at night to close off their perimeter. The Korean troops attacked their enemies with everything they had. Although they did not kill as many as the American soldiers, the count of weapons and material they captured was much higher. They did their best to ensure that each of their attacks was a complete blow for the enemy, whilst keeping their own casualty rate far below average. It was not unusual for Korean units to have a kill ratio of more than 20-1 on their missions. For these reasons, the Americans leaned heavily on their Korean allies in performing dangerous missions. In February 1967, the 11th Company of the Blue Dragon Brigade suffered a night attack from 2 Viet Cong regiments in their base near the Gia Binh village in the Quang Ngai province in South Vietnam. Surrounded with barbed wire and claymore mines, housed with ready-to-fight-to-the-death Koreans, the base was attacked from all sides. As usual, the VC attacked in waves supported by strong mortar fire. Masses of charging VC soldiers did not frighten the Korean Marines, who fired back with every weapon they had. Bullets rained on the charging enemy. The Marines even fired mortar shells at point-blank range. Nonetheless, the Viet Cong broke into the base and the fight turned into hand-to-hand combat. Base commander Captain Chong Kyung-gin ordered his men to pull back to lure the VC deep into the base. Then, he sent 2 squads to seal the gap from which the Viet Cong entered and trap the enemy. The Koreans charged at the enemy with their bayonets. By morning, Korean Marines had pushed the enemy back to the jungle. After the air was cleared, there were 254 bodies of Viet Cong lying all over the place. Only 15 Korean soldiers had been killed. For this battle, the Korean government awarded more decorations than for any other battle the Korean Army had participated in. For their heroism shown in battle, the entire unit was promoted a rank.
영상에 나온 짜빈동 전투는 그야말로 전설이었습니다. 청룡부대 기지를 공격한 적들의 규모는 압도적이었고 전투가 시작될 시점에 이미 진지 하나는 돌파, 또 다른 진지도 돌파되기 직전이었습니다. 그대로 돌파를 허용하면 일개 중대가 전멸할지도 모르는 큰 위기였죠. 여단에서도 이 기습을 부록은 애로우 상황, 즉 부대가 완전한 괴멸 위협에 처해 진지 내에 포격이나 폭격을 가해야 하는 상황으로 판단하고 있었습니다. 아군 피해를 무릅쓴 화력 지원을 검토하고 있었던 것입니다. 그러나 청룡부대는 동이 트기 전에 역습에 성공의 대승을 거뒀습니다. 동이 튼 뒤 도착한 지원 병력이 할 일은 도망가는 적들을 섬멸하는 정도뿐이었죠. 짜빈동 전투는 지금까지도 비대칭적인 전력을 이끌고 걸어온 기습에도 일방적인 승리를 거둔 모범적인 작전으로 여겨지고 있는데요. 전투가 끝난 후에는 한국 해병대의 중대전술기지를 배우기 위해서 미군을 포함한 동맹국 각군이 방문해 올 정도였습니다. 이를 통해 한국군 전술의 우월함과 해병대의 용맹함을 전 세계에 떨칠 수 있었죠. 요즘 들어서 한국에서 전쟁이 벌어졌을 때 지금의 한국인들이 예전처럼 목숨을 걸고 싸울 수 있을까 하는 걱정을 종종 볼 수 있습니다. 과거처럼 국가를 지키기 위해 몸을 내던질 사람이 얼마나 되겠느냐는 것인데요. 하지만 베트남 파병의 사례를 보면 알 수 있듯이 한국인들은 내 나라를 지키는 일이 아님에도 불구하고 내 가족에게 좋은 옷, 맛난 음식을 사주기 위해서 총알이 빗발치는 사지조차 향할 수 있는 민족입니다. 그리고 그 당시엔 지난 6.25 전쟁의 노하우가 있었다지만 그렇게 향한 전장에서도 엄청나게 잘 싸울 수 있는 민족이기도 하죠. 이 시대에 한국에서 전쟁이 벌어진다고 하더라도 한국인들은 나라는 사랑할 순 없을지라도 내 사람들은 사랑하기 때문에 기꺼이 싸울 것입니다. 요즘 들어서 한국군의 미래를 걱정하는 목소리가 많아지는 것은 어쩔 수 없는 일이지만 이런 점을 생각하면 그렇게까지 크게 걱정할 필요는 없을 것입니다. 끝까지 시청해주셔서 감사합니다. 도움이 되셨다면 좋아요를, 다른 이야기도 궁금하시면 구독을 눌러주세요.